Hello, everyone. It's nice to greet you on SDG's webinar, which we had some small technical problems, but now we are ready to work. And we introduce you with SDG1. So here is our agenda for today. I'm Aya Lockenbach, project manager at Consul Business Consulting and Training Center. We are one of project partners, and our role is SDG1, which means end of poverty in all the world. After then, I will introduce you with Inese, Vaivare, director of the Latvian Platform for Development Cooperation, LAPAS, and then Martin Valters will tell you about his project Age is Not an Obstacle and Ending the Poverty. After it's time for questions and answers and discussions, I ask you to type your questions and we will answer. Poverty is one of the main goals in all over the world. However, poverty is reducing, but not so fast as it needed. And in some countries, it is even people are getting poorer and poorer. So here you can see some facts about poverty in the world, which means that it is a really serious problem, and we all have to think about this and our way of how to help to reduce it. And now I will introduce you with Inese, Vaivare.
Hello. I'm happy that I'm invited to speak in this workshop online webinar on behalf of my organization and my country. So I will shortly introduce you with the voluntary national review process as a best practice case of Latvia for work on SDGs, and of course with a short link to the SDG1. My presentation is based on the publication, which you can find also online on Latvian case, where we see voluntary national review as a connector of multi-stakeholder work on sustainable development goals. So just to be very short about my organization, we work on development cooperation or external aid, but still we also work on global education, explaining the global issues locally and using methodology of globalization. So why SDGs and development cooperation? In 2014, as we all know, post-2015 process started. Before MDGs, which were concerned more with, let's say, developing world or partner countries, was linked with their development. But since SDGs, the framework became universal, and actually it was important for all organizations to join the process in all countries. So we joined our forces with environmental NGOs, and we saw that this environmental branch is also empowering also work on social and economic issues, because as we know, everything is linked. So the biggest challenge for us was actually to work on this issue, raising some additional financing and resources and applying it nationally. So how we do that is we try to mainstream the topic of SDGs through other topics. So, for example, if we talk about food security, about food, we look from the perspective of all SDGs. The same issue we do, for example, when we talk about global tax injustice, which actually leads to the global poverty, as we all know. So we try to link it again with all SDGs as it's linked issue and mainstreamed issue. So what we do, we try to use different kind of approaches. We have a specific part on our web page. We have methodologies. We also work with different specific workers like social workers, teachers, private sector, and so. So I wonder if everybody can mute themselves because there are some background noises. I can do it. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. So yeah, so mainstreaming through some topics. So as I told, I would like to focus on voluntary national review, which is a review which is performed by the government in United Nations. Each country applies voluntary for that, where the name of voluntary national review comes from. So Latvia presented it in 2018, but it's around some 50 countries each year presenting these reviews. So what we can see is that actually at international level, so many processes are ongoing. And if we look from the lens of poverty, there are many networks and initiatives at global level. But my observation is that they are not always linked with the national level activities. So I think the empowerment of national level NGOs and national networking is of very high importance. So when we try to systematize all the information available, we understood that there's no external answer to how we can work in our national level, and we tried to develop our own perspective. So at first we thought that all NGOs who are concerned with SDGs could give their best practices and opinion papers, but unfortunately we understood that people do a lot of daily work, but they don't think in so global terms. Sometimes they don't think sometimes so theoretically. So actually we found out a challenge how to link and the work of non-governmental organizations at national level with the global needs which we needed for the report. So also government process was quite close. So what we did actually, we tried to find some support from external partners, for example, from Embassy of Sweden, political support, and tried to gather all stakeholders at one table. And I think if you look from any SDG, also from the SDG1 perspective, we can see that actually all stakeholders are always involved. Private sector, who is creating maybe inequalities, educational sector, who is actually, as we see from the latest researches on poverty, that it actually the access to the education is reduced for target groups which face more poverty and so on. So we also participated, as I said, in different NGO international events. So you can find our Spotlight report on our webpage, and I will not go in depth on that, but from the perspective of SDG1, I must say that we also wanted to highlight some specific focus like leaving no one behind, which is concerning every SDG, and inequality, gender, and youth issues. So you can read more on our report about these specific perspectives of Agenda 2030. As to the case studies, some specific case studies you can find also in the annex of this report, which I have mentioned, and also on our webpage. We have gathered 3 case studies per each SDG, also per SDG1, and there you can find personal stories of people who are working on these SDGs, because as we know, there is always a person behind the process. And here you can see some pictures of a few of them, and some are also from SDG1. So, as I said, the very central event of this voluntary national review is a presentation of it in New York in United Nations for all countries in the world. So what we did, we actually were successful example, I think, from all countries around the world. I know that also our Finland colleagues have done the same. We co-presented with our government the report by non-governmental organizations, and I think it's quite successful, and I really encourage all countries who are still preparing their voluntary national reviews to push forward for the presentation, because I think it's the only way how we can raise the voice of non-governmental organizations. So we focus a bit on human security and social networking as a tool for sustainable development, but probably there can be different perspectives which you'll find useful at the national level. So to finalize, what's the next step? So one thing is that we organized a follow-up event to hold our government officials and politicians accountable. So I think it was quite successful that we had more than 50 people who applied from different sectors, and we had more than 14 speakers from all stakeholder groups, from private sector, from academia, politicians, governmental, non-governmental, who were presenting their opinions. We also are now working on the new national development plan in Latvia. So now it's open for public consultations, but we want to feed in also the indicator sets for each SDG from public sector, from civil society sector experience. And we hope that that we will manage to cooperate also with the NGOs working on SDG1 and all other SDGs on daily basis. I think we have a lot of many opportunities if we look around, but we need to coordinate among ourselves to get the resources. And I think also CSO sector needs to mainstream the SDGs in their, understanding of the way they work. And it is quite important, especially in these SDGs, which are not usually seen as sustainability SDGs in comparison with SDGs which are environmental. So statistics, as I said, and of course awareness raising, because as we know that for change we need people's understanding and awareness on the topic. So just to finalize, just on SDG1 in Latvia, because I know that my colleague will continue with his example, but I think the run for economic breakthrough in my country, which is defined in National Development Plan, has raised quite high inequality, which is a topic before the elections, but not afterwards. We have quite many poverty risk groups which are not mentioned in politics because they are maybe even stigmatized, like for example single parents. In percentage, 33% of single parent families are in poverty risk group in my country, and I think it's a big pity. And we shouldn't think about SDGs as separate issues, but link each SDG with each other. And I think this is how we can go forward. So about case studies, you can read online. There's one case study about Facebook page mobilizing the community support, which was actually started by people who have emigrated from Latvia. About e-shop, internet shop on raising money for projects of for reducing poverty by people who are with different disabilities, which is also one of the good examples, and also case of family support for families which face different let's say challenges in their lives. So this is in very short run about my organizational example. As I said, we work more at national, at policy coordination level, trying to encourage Latvian NGOs to work on SDGs, trying to pull together all stakeholders and also governmental ones. So I hope that this example is encouraging also you to take more active role. And now I give a floor to my colleague who will give you a more specific case on SDG1. Thank you. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to pick up them now, as I unfortunately need to leave, and I understand that we can put them in writing in a chat box probably. So if there are any, then I'm happy to answer. So I think I don't have any, so thank you very much. There is a question. Oh, okay. So, what is the best case of localizing SDGs in Latvia? This is like you would ask to the mother who is her best child. Actually, to be honest, I loved all cases we gathered, and I was so surprised about these fantastic people who are working at local level. And I think that all of us already work on SDGs. Every person. We just need to understand how we are linked. But for me, I think the cases from private sector, social enterprises were the ones I liked because I think in private sector, if you live in the narrative of running for the money, then social perspective might be quite challenging. So I would say that these are the ones I would look more forward. But as I said, I like them all. Yes, thank you, Vuki. I'm reading your question. So SDGs are slow in progress, not on the track. So not reaching. So it is a question of measurements, and those who follow the MDGs, you know that at some point, and those who are fans of indicators, you probably know that sometimes you can change the measurement and enjoy reaching some targets better than it's in reality. And I would say the one thing is for us to keep our governments accountable that they don't change the indicators, don't change the measurements. About slow on progress, we have in my organization such a saying that there are two things needed for change. One thing is individual responsibility, because everyone is in any position responsible for a change and being responsible about SDGs, and another is political will. And we know what's happening now in global level with political will, and I think that we can keep our governments accountable, but this requires for us having enough knowledge to do that. So speeding up the progress, my answer is that everything, as I said, starts from the person, and I would say that education should be mainstream and should be at every first step of every goal, actually, because this is how we can make bigger change, and we can actually measure the change in the countries where education is more accessible, with better numbers than in others. So I hope it's a very complex question, but I hope that I answered it. And funds for localizing SDGs, I would say that to be very honest with you, this is my hobby, SDGs, more or less. We have not received any funds except Force International from Europe Aid, small sub-grant to do the VNR work, because you cannot have as a hobby go to New York. It's not so cheap. But otherwise, this work is more on voluntary basis. So I would say like that: you get any fund what you can get, and then you just look from the lens of SDGs and try to put it in. This is how we do it here. So I hope it helps. About climate change. To be honest, I'm not the expert on climate change and I'm not an environmental expert at all, but I can say that since I have started working on SDGs, I also do upcycling. I reduce my consumer choices. So again, it comes back to us, each other, but unfortunately, I know that my colleagues in the environmental sector have measured the impact, and they say that even if every individual does a change, if politicians do not change the whole systems, how we look on development, on global development, then the climate will not be saved. And unfortunately, the data is awful. Even though we have all nice climate change agreements, the flora and fauna is dying, and I think we are not able to stop it, but the question is how we deal with not stopping that and what we can achieve best to do at least some climate change. And we have one more. What could be a good EU-based digital solution to improve mainstreaming of SDGs? I think that there are quite many digital solutions and platforms by United Nations, and I have to be honest that they are open also to put some national issues online. I would even say that it's quite hard to orient in all these sea of different materials. So maybe it's wiser not to have something new, but to have some roadmaps or from different perspectives, from national, from local, from different SDG perspective. So this is my first quick answer, but I think actually what I heard now in St. Petersburg when I was there about this mobile app about SDGs, that actually now it's owned by somebody and it's not quite open open source. So I would say, knowing the use of mobile phones in global world, we could develop maybe more on some app perspective, not so much web perspective. So I guess I have answered all the questions. So thank you very much for your attention. And now for my colleague.
Hello. At first, I would like to express my gratitude to everybody who is still online for your patience. My name is Martins, and I am a project manager of the project Age is Not an Obstacle. It's quite related to the subject of our today's discussion. It's about reducing or ending the poverty. I would like to remind you at first the definitions of the poverty. Condition where people's basic needs for food, clothing, or shelter are not being met. And poverty is generally of two types. Absolute poverty, when the person indeed doesn't have sufficient resources, and relative poverty, when people do not enjoy a certain minimum level of living standards as determined by the government. What is the difference? What is the difference between them? Next. What is the difference and what can we do with first with absolute poverty? Actually, by my own opinion, no, please back. Actually, by my own opinion, such problem in Europe does not exist at all, or maybe it's very minor program. Because average European eats much more delicious food than King George Henry VIII with his 7 wives and Queen Victoria could even imagine. The systems of social insurance and social assistance ensure that problems of absolute poverty in Europe is resolved. Any homeless person can get shelter and food if he or she asks such assistance. Maybe problem is just information of the clients, how they can get. Skip it and next please, and skip it and next please. But what can we do with the relative poverty? The main reason of the relative poverty is not located outside the person, neighbors, society, government, but inside the person who feels herself poor or needy. It is related to dissatisfaction about what he and she already owns and what he wants. It is related to the difference of wishes and real possibilities, And this problem cannot be solved by any system of social assistance and protection by increasing social grants or services. We can do nothing with the relative power, but we can show the way how a person can reduce this difference between her wishes and possibilities. And this is what we are doing in our project. Age is not an obstacle. Next, please. This project is organized by Latvian, Lithuanian, and Estonian associations of pensioners organizations and Riga Students University, financed by Not Plus Adult, and the global objective is to enhance the quality of lives of retired persons. Next, please. The particular objective of the project is to develop training program for retired persons and persons of pre-retirement age, relevant methodology, training materials, and to train trainers from different pensioners organizations. It includes 4 modules: how to survive after an adaptation period after retirement, including what opportunities we have to receive social assistance, and how to organize small business, how to maintain physical health, how to maintain psychological health, and how to avoid and overcome loneliness. The retired people is one of the most vulnerable social groups. As you can see, about more than 40% of all retired persons and more than 74% of single pensioners are exposed to the risk of poverty. Next, please. If we take care about these retired persons, we should a little bit consider what is the role of retired persons in the society. We know that biological objective of the existence of any alive creature is to continue the species. The biological objective of existence of any human is to continue family, tribe, nation, civilization, mankind. And the logical conclusion from this statement is that our children must raise their children, our grandchildren, not to waste their resources to keep their parents, us, alive. Grandparents are to assist their children to raise grandchildren, avoiding to substitute them or even to dominate over their children. But to be able to implement this role, retired persons have to take care of themselves, him, herself, and they have to have resources. And how to acquire such resources? Just by continuing to work or by starting their own business. Within the project, we developed the first unified and exhaustive overview of social assistance, social services, and healthcare in every municipality in Latvia, and now it is published in our website. And this is for assistance. But to start the new businesses for retired persons, we developed the training materials about all related issues. And now all the training of trainers of all 4 modules is close to the finish. And next, please. And we will start training of target group this spring. Very supportive for us was that a new law on social entrepreneurship came into force last year, and it is devoted to the solving problem about opportunities to get jobs or to start businesses for this first of target groups that are most exposed to the risk of poverty. This with based on this law, a special program was developed, and now people who are going to start social entrepreneurship can get grants. Here you can see that this grant is from 20,000 to up to 200,000 euros, and it is sufficient sum to start real business. Eligible expenses for this program are both long-term investments, current assets, remuneration costs for employees, and even for training. Next, please. So, and now let's consider once more what means ending the poverty. Is it a real objective or just a slogan of politicians? As a project manager, I am used to formulate objectives using SMART conceptions: specific, measurable, achievable, real, time constrained. Unfortunately, for me, it seems that this ending of the poverty or ending the poverty is just a political slogan. But if we want to do something good for our families, nations, for mankind at all, we have to change it into smart objectives and to start new projects to achieve this goal. Thank you for your attention. So, any questions? So the question is, in your role of retired persons in society, you made some interesting statements. Are these backed by evidence? If so, can you please share the sources? Actually, very, very good question. Thank you for it. But it doesn't have any evidences made by scientists. You can feel this yourself, what for we are living. Don't you remember what you learned in school? I guess it's obvious. It doesn't need, it's axioma. It's not theorema, it's axioma like in geometry. The shortest way between 2 points is the direct line. And what is your definition of social enterprise? It's not my definition, it is a definition in the law, and it means that at first it is a business company who has social goal to support a specific target group, people in need or something like that. And the profit could be used not for paying out to owners, but just to achieve this specific social target, objective. What you will suggest politicians to end poverty? Actually, so the question is, what will you suggest politicians to end poverty? Point A, this relative poverty, it is a gap between our wishes and our possibilities. We can reduce our wishes, but there are very, very powerful forces who are pushing our wishes up. At first, commercials, envy, globalization. Buy more. Your neighbor already has. You have to have too. How to withstand with this pressure it's very, very difficult question. There are factors that are decreasing our ability to increase our incomes. Lack of knowledge, lack of courage, lack of starting money. And our project Age is not an obstacle, deals with these issues. We encourage people, we give them knowledge, we show them where they can get money, how to lower this level of wishes. Actually, I do not have idea. So I guess it is a question for politicians how to reduce an unnecessary wishes of the population. Where do you see the world in 10 years? Better or worse? I hope it will be better. I hope. But I'm not sure. Just remind, changes happened during the last 10 years. And 10 years ago, we hoped that world will become better. If it is the truth, I don't know. But I hope, anyway, I do hope that my children, my grandchildren, actually I have 6 children and 11 grandchildren, and I hope they will live better than us in the safer and more human world than we do. So, what say? Yeah. What would you say to young, highly educated who can't find a job? Actually, when I was unemployed, I found a job. I cut wood. No, if you have university degree, if you have master degree, if you do have even doctoral degree, it doesn't mean that you should avoid or reject physical work. If your knowledge is not necessary to anybody, change your way of the life. Start a job you can do and you will be paid for. So, thank you. Any more questions? And in your opinion, what companies can do to end poverty, and is it possible? Companies, what companies would you mean? Because you see, the global objective of any company, any business company, is profit. It is profit. And of course, they can share just part of their incomes to pay their employees. Of course, they can pay more. But anyway, they will try to earn more and more and more. So that I guess it's impossible. Thanks a lot.
Thanks to our experienced speakers. It was so interesting to hear their opinions and interesting views. So I would like to make some conclusions. What we hear today, we get some new knowledges about SDG1, how to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Thank you for your listening to us and viewing our presentation and live how we look like. And we would be very happy if you follow us at Facebook and social media. As well as I would like to inform you that tomorrow we have another one webinar, which will be even more interesting than today, if it's possible. So, thank you very much and see you